Hey everyone, thank you again for coming. I'm Sage Dennis and I'm with my colleague Kegan Hilaire. And today we're going to be speaking to you about the who, what, whens of starting and expanding your farming operation. Just some quick housekeeping rules. I'm not hearing anyone, so we're already off to a great start. And if you happen to have some questions along the way, please feel free to put them in that chat box as they come up. And try not to use the chat log. My fish brain will get distracted. And if you happen to find some value in this webinar, we have plenty of other recordings on our website. Feel free to visit them. And then lastly, for just housekeeping stuff, who is we? We is Rodale. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and pretty much what that means is we are a nonprofit and we are focusing on organic research, training, and education. And all of these little stars that you see on the map are someone on not even the entire Rodale team, but specifically the consulting team. And actually, I think it's, even though this is our most recent, it may be out of date because our team has been expanding pretty rapidly recently. And so today, this is what our agenda is. We're going to be talking about what that dream you have is, how we can put that on paper, how that dream is going to be able to essentially survive. And then once we essentially have all that together, what we need to do in order to manifest it, if you will. And this is something that we run into a lot when we are working with farmers is all farmers come to us with the same mindset. They have a burning passion to want to serve their communities or feed people good food. Part of our jobs is figuring out where they are and helping them change potentially change a part of their operation or their mindset to help them take that next step to be more of a career-minded farmer. And if anyone is on here today and they're like, okay, well, I'm just gardening, I'm not doing anything too crazy, like I'm not looking to turn this into a career, that's totally fine. A lot of this content is still going to be incredibly valuable to you because if you're just able to take one of these aspects and entrepreneurialize it, if that's even a word, you will be able to like take value and apply it into your farm, and like first and foremost is like that altruistic mindset that everyone comes here with. Like one of the things we really do is like try to talk you down or calm you down because though we are going to have nothing but opportunities in front of us, we are going to want to make educated decisions. And that's going to be really hard to do as we are building up our idea. And building up that idea leads to like that clarity and that vision, if you will, of what your farm will be, of what you want to, what type of farmer you wish to become. And as you start to figure out the type of farmer that you wish to become and the farm that you wish to have thrive, you begin to understand how you need to prioritize your concerns within your operation. And also farmers, one of the hardest things for a farmer who is starting to do is to learn how to completely separate themselves financially from their farm. And sometimes that's not even possible. And if that is the circumstance, that is okay, but we need to make sure that we have as much separation as we can to keep ourselves safe, or we need to have as much of a safety net as possible to make sure that we don't run into any danger, but ideally both. And one thing I really want to take a moment to talk about is biggest mistake. There's a lot of big mistakes. I don't think there's a single biggest mistake, but there's a lot of common pitfalls that we see, especially for earlier farmers, that we hope that you will be able to take what we give you from this webinar and be able to avoid some of these. One of the most common things is I look at farming as a balloon. The farm operation itself is your balloon, and you, the farmer, are blowing into it as hard as you can. You're putting your time, your energy, your resources, your blood, sweat, and a lot of tears into it. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing until what happens? Either there's a big snapback because we have overcommitted and we have let our creativity and the opportunities that we see define the borders of our operation to the point we're no longer able to handle it. And we start dropping some balls, or worst case scenario, the operation itself isn't able to survive. Kagan, do you happen to have any thoughts or anything of like big mistakes that we run into?
This is definitely, especially on my own farm, this was one that we did my first season growing. We tried to do over 120 varieties of vegetables just because we were going to do everything for everybody and we were going to do a little bit for everyone. And there were places in my field that year that I never even like I planted, I prepped, I planted, I cover cropped, we did the whole thing, and I never even harvested because I never had time to get to all of those things. So and yeah, how much better my time would have been spent, especially that first early on in my business to make sure that we just had everything tight from the beginning. And this one definitely popped on me. Um, the other big mistake I think with the beginning farmers is not understanding that it is a small business. Any statistic that applies to a small business also applies to a small farm business. So if there's stats about small businesses that the owner isn't paying themselves for the first 2 to 4 years, that applies to your small farm business as much as it applies to any other small business in your community. So having an understanding and keeping an idea and making sure that the idea that this is always a business first is hard for a lot of small and beginning farmers. And it's hard, especially because you are so emotionally invested in the project. It's not a job, it's more of a calling. So it's hard to you can make educated decisions and you can still purposely make bad ones because you get into that hobby farmer mindset, like you touched on earlier, where you might know better and you might do it anyway. And it's not for a benefit of your business. And that's what all of your decisions need to be focused around, if that's how you're gonna treat this. So yeah, I think that's probably the other biggest mistake that I see for sure, and I'm guilty of both of them.
And I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of repetition about some of these mistakes because, like, to even build on top of that, um, if we were a business and we were not in farming and we were selling sneakers, like, or we are Nike and we are not making our sales, who do we have to speak with? We have to speak with the board of directors. We have to answer to our shareholders. We will get fired. The business will go under. And I say this because as a farmer, you are the single largest investor in your operation, and you need to make sure that you pay yourself sufficiently as well. We're going to be talking about that, but that is another substantial mistake that we see all the time. And some of those things that you can do to help like avoid that along the way is like starting to think about this process, how you hope to do it. If there are no resources limiting you, what is that ideal farm? And then we can work ourselves back. How are you going to get to that point? Let's start bringing it into reality. After you are happy with what you think is a realistic approach to what you're going to be doing, how is it going to survive? How is it going to pay for itself once it is even a thing? And then once we have figured those three things out, we're going to manifest it. In other terms, we're going to be looking for a model that works for us. We're going to be creating a plan. We're going to be figuring out our finances, and then we're going to be funding it. And these branches of your operation that I have below are just some aspects that I like to think about. These aren't the only four, and these aren't even necessarily branches, but these are the way that I kind of categorize them. I have market operations, business, which is how you manage yourself, business operations, how you manage your farm, administrative operations, how you manage your paperwork, and creative expression, how are you allowing yourself to be that unique farm to not only bring in customers, but to satiate your own creative expression. Business planning, the fun stuff. Do you have to do it? The not so long answer is yes. The longer answer is yes, but dot dot dot. There's depending on where you are and what you're going to be doing within your operation, or even to like what degree you're looking to scale, you may not need that 10, 20, 30, even 40 page business plan, and you could do something a lot smaller and a lot more manageable. And even if then you're like, okay, well, it's not my thing. Well, of course it's not your thing. It's no one's thing. And that's why you should do it, because this is a way to force you to go through and organize your thoughts. And you're going to have to go through every aspect of it. And you will see how complete or incomplete your idea is. On top of that, it gives you an idea of how you are going to be a farm. Are you going to focus on retail sales? Are you going to be loyal to a farmer's market? Are you going to focus on wholesale? Are you going to try to work exclusively through co-ops? Knowing where you are as soon as you can, or knowing where you are going to want to be or be going as soon as you can, is going to be invaluable, because as you start to spread yourselves thin within these different channels, you're going to leave more money on the table than if you were to dedicate yourself into one realm of speciality. And this is one of those business canvases I'm talking about. This is something that I'm getting into myself. We have our key partners here, which is, if you want to think about it, anyone you have to interact with in order to do what you want to do. So if your seed suppliers, your fertility salesmen, distributors, if you're sourcing anything from them, the activities that you need to do, what do you actually have to do in order to do what you want to do? You want to cultivate, you want to grow things, you need to manage your farm. And what are the resources that you are going to have in order to be able to do what you want to do? You need to work, you need to have seed, and you need to have the facilities in order to be able to process that crop to sell. And having some land, I guess, would be kind of important. So again, just to reiterate, who you're working with is your partners, your key activities is what you're doing, and your resources is what you need to do it. Your customer relationships is how you're networking, like how are you building your customer base? Your channels is how you are selling. And your customer segments are like who you are actually selling to. And the channels and segments here, I don't want you to be confused because it says CS, like they're identical. This would be more so specific, where your channel is a CSA, your segment may be Harrisburg Area Community College, for instance. Cost structure, what's it cost to do what you want to do, and your revenue stream, what you're going to make from doing what you want to do. Like all of this is brought together by how you want to do it, which is ultimately where I find the farmers that I work with to have the most success when they understand how to leverage that value.
And I would go, Sage, if you could just go back one slide. I would say this is a pretty good outline for a business plan. This in and of itself is not a complete plan. But I think
Mm-hmm.
thinking through the relationships, thinking about the sections, thinking about how the different segments of your farm and how they'll operate, I think this is a good way to kind of start to wrap your head around all those ideas, because your business plan should be pretty, actually, it was a good point you made earlier. I think your level of uncomfortableness with writing a business plan is actually how badly you need to actually do it. Because it means how you aren't familiar, you aren't comfortable with what those other aspects are to running your farm. So if you're uncomfortable, that's a sign that you need to do it even more so. So I think that was a great point for that. And I think, yeah, this is a good outline for what a good business plan should be. There's a lot of templates online. There are resources available through different grants if you're in the state of Pennsylvania, different consultants who can help you with that. And yeah, but I think this is, if you're going to do it on your own, it's definitely possible. You could do a pretty simple one. But if you need it for lending, or if you're taking it to a bank, you might have to do something a little bit more involved. But I think this slide is a pretty good outline for what a solid business plan would contain for sure.
Perfect. And if this is something that anyone wishes to take advantage of, there's a really good book that focuses on using a business canvas, and I believe it's just called Business Model. Yeah, the Business Model Canvas. Feel free to reach out to me. I know that's not too eccentric of a name, and I'm not able to identify the author off the top of my head. But him, that's a great book. Michael Kilpatrick also does a lot on farm financing, and so does Charlotte Smith. So like those are also great resources that if you wanted to try to dive down this a little bit more, you could, they would definitely be good areas to start that journey.
And I will say too, with having a small farm, when at some point in the season when everything is up in the air and you've kind of just going with it. There's a point in every vegetable season, I feel like, where you're just going with whatever comes at you. But it's helpful to have these things written down, to have these things. So when you're not sure what to do, you can go back and read your business plan. You can go back and read what you wrote for what you had planned for. So when you get a year or two in and you start changing things and adjusting, like what was really the whole goal for starting this? And are you staying true to that? The business plan is a good way to kind of check yourself on those things too, but also making sure that what you're doing is still realistic. So I think it's a good reference document for the farm owner and especially for the farmer. If you're also doing all the labor, I think it is really important to have that check to know that if you're not doing something properly, you're not doing something well, that in your business plan you said you wouldn't be doing it. So why are we still doing it? So even again, when you can make educated guesses incorrectly just because your heart's in it. So this is a good way to kind of call yourself on a lot of those situations.
Absolutely. Well, actually, if I can, I'll just take a couple steps back here because to that point, Kegan, you're totally right. Like giving in, handle unexpected instability and opportunity, and that is exactly the that is the blessing and curse that a lot of people do not realize it can be. I am a chef, and I walk up to your farmer's market stand and I tell you I love the Brussels sprouts that you have, and I want to buy every single Brussels sprout from you that you are going to produce for the rest of the season. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, that's a hard circumstance to figure out. Like, what do? You can consult that business plan because it's able to say, or you're able to see where you told yourself you're going to invest your energy. Do you want to focus on those larger wholesale accounts, or do you want to have a more customer facing approach? Do you have enough capacity to split both? If so, great. If not, well, let's evaluate and see if we have a crop failure, if that deal goes through and I lose that Brussels sprout contract, how am I going to be then? So there's a business plan is something that I critically undervalued for way longer than I frankly should have,
And there's a
personally.
there's a quote I really like that you don't rise to the level of your ambitions, you sink to the level of your systems. So the more systems that you have in place, the better ones that you have. Again, when everything else is going wrong, you can rely on some amount of regularity because you've built it into your design. So this is just a good way to get off on the right foot and just build a good foundation for the business and for the farm going forward.
And so now you got the stuff. How are you going to sell the stuff? Because the most common and most complex question that we get probably all the time. And I'm actually going to ask everyone to try to recall, what did Kegan say he did in the first year? He tried to sell to everyone in the first year. He tried to grow for everyone in the first year. Pardon me. When you grow for everyone, or when you try to sell to everyone, in my mind, you're selling to no one because you don't know how to further immerse yourselves in building up your sales channels. You have a little bit of water trickling in from 8 different pipes, where if you just opened up one valve, it could just be the floodgates out of one. That's kind of the mindset that I try to encourage a lot of people to have. The easiest way to think of it is, who is your perfect customer? It's the person that never argues about the price. They're there every weekend. They come back every season. They tell their friends about it. Is that your perfect customer? Great. I want you to market to whoever you think that mental image is. Because when you invest to who you think is going to be your ideal customer, you will get the traction from those type of individuals. And one thing that's hard about that, I would say, from a perspective of a small farm, is that advertising or marketing isn't done in any traditional sense that I'm aware of. How are farms marketed now? Well, I don't know of any farms that have TV ads going, or nothing showed during the Super Bowl, but they had a weird Temu ad. And I say all this because advertising, as many people approach it, or what we come to know it as societally, is not how you should be approaching advertising as a small business. And that advertising is tied to your selling, because what you are selling or advertising is not just a crop, but it's a solution, or it's an answer to a specific problem. We get to the farmers market now. We have our crops, we know what we want to do, and we are there. We are selling it in the thick of it. You have each one of these potential customers come up to you, and each one of them has a priority in which you are able to satiate, or a concern you're able to solve or satiate. How you're going to do that all comes down to your ability to look at their angle, understand their hurt or their frustration or their fears, and be able to remedy that. And Kagan, I know that you have some experience with farmers markets as well. Have you kind of seen yourself in these opportunities, or how has this kind of worked in the field for you?
I think this slide is actually a good push for why you should have some diversity, especially if you're going to go to a farmer's market, because you're going to run into and going to need to sell and have each of these different kinds of people as a weekly regular customer. So I think this speaks to the need for some diversity. It'd be hard to just go and a blueberry farm or a potato farm. So I think if you're going to go to a farmer's market, it speaks to the idea that you need a little bit more diversity in your offering. Whereas if you're just selling to chefs, or if you're just selling wholesale or to a distributor, you can kind of get less and less varieties as you kind of get larger and larger quantities. So yeah, it's kind of a mix. And again, selling to each of them is different. The conversation is different. You run into all kinds of people, especially at farmers markets, like all kinds of people, which is what's so fun about them. So yeah, I think it's, especially if you're going to market, there is some amount of diversity that's needed in your crop offering.
Absolutely. But like you were alluding to those sales channels, and I just kind of wanted to be able to show everyone that what that looks like. You have your highest margin to lowest margin, and none of this is necessarily better or worse. I really don't like thinking it that way. It more so should be a representation of how you wish to operate your farm. Because if you are someone that is afraid of people and does not wish to be customer facing and just wishes to really refine their systems, potentially wholesale is great for you. Maybe working through a local food hub like Lancaster Farm Fresh here in Pennsylvania is a very popular one that a lot of our growers work with. Institutions or distributors are something that we don't necessarily have the opportunity to deal with, but ultimately, regardless of the level that you are working at, the two most important skills that you always have to have is your ability to communicate and your ability to share information.
And I'll say too, for the first year of starting my own farm, again, we tried to do all three of these things. I had friends who had distributors. I had friends who were chefs and had grocery stores. And I was doing a CSA. We were going to 2 farmers markets a week. And we were originally going to get rid of the CSA and just do markets. We were just going to go to farmers markets every week. And I obviously have this job at Rodale, so I couldn't spend every night after work harvesting to go to a market that nobody came to. And for the first year, that happened it happened often enough that it was annoying. So we actually ended up reducing our markets and eventually cutting our farmers markets because again, it was more like a lifestyle decision where I needed to know how many bunches of kale I needed. I needed to know how many pounds of potatoes I needed. There was no ambiguity for my harvest quantities or how much needed to get planted every day. So I think we had a nice little switch where we had a chance to kind of pivot just based on what we were looking for, just with our work-life balance, with how we wanted the farm to operate or how we were able to operate based on labor, based on money, based on all of the things that you're going to have to be dealing with when you're doing this. So being able to kind of reassess and decide when one of these market channels maybe isn't serving you anymore, or maybe you have this great idea for doing it this way, but being open to other options, possibly being better in the long run. So being able to reassess that again speaks to the business plan, having that business plan, because you're able to basically go back and run through scenarios based on your numbers that you used originally. So I think that again is really helpful. But also to your point of originally I wanted to sell to every chef in my area. I wanted to sell that. I wanted to be on every single menu. And actually now we are most of the menu at a few restaurants instead of one thing on all the menus. We've worked with a very few restaurants, but we are now most of their vegetable menu. So, and that I've been able to essentially contract grow. It takes a lot of the liability off of the farmer because I know I have guaranteed markets for it because my chefs are looking for it. So if you can get in a relationship where you can sit down with your crop plan and your chef can write their menu for the year, that's really best case scenario. Don't try to overextend yourself. Don't try to do 100 deliveries a week. Don't even try to do 20 deliveries a week. Do 3, do 5, and do 5 really good ones, because that is going to be long term better for you than trying to nickel and dime your way through. It's kind of an abundance mentality where we're going to take care of the one we got because it's the best one in the world. And until the next one comes along, it's always the best one. So yeah, I think making sure that you work with a lower quantity and a higher quality should have been something that we focused on earlier. And yeah, it's something I wish we would have done from the beginning, but had a chance to kind of develop into over the last few years.
And Kagan, could you actually, if you don't mind, explain a little bit like what did that initial start of that relationship look like with interacting with a chef? Like how did you get to that point of speaking with them and then essentially becoming their point of contact for your crops? Like was that something where they just reached out, or was it something where you were able to more so speak to them at a level that was more personal and provide what they saw as a solution, and from there that's where your relationship was able to be fostered?
Um, we put in a lot of work.
One moment, Kagan, you might be breaking up here.
Check.
We can hear you. Are you still here, Kagan? I was going to say, if so, like by all means,
Oh,
we don't need to look at you. All right, well, Kagan, when you get back, please feel free to just jump in. But speaking about looking at other opportunities, so now that we have kind of figured out where we want to be in terms of channels, and myself and Kagan focus mostly with small and diversified vegetable farmers, so we're approaching this mostly from the retail perspective. Though everything can be said from a broader stroke of other sales channels, this is most blatantly true for those customer facing roles, where having a value ladder, or now that you've been able to provide a solution and establish a level of trust, what can we do next to gain more value from the interaction? Don't just have them come and buy their vegetables and or buy their tomatoes and their salad mix there. Have them come and buy their tomatoes and their salad mix there, and then some berries too from a farm down the way. And you could even work with a local baker or potentially source some maple syrup or honey. Just bring additional products that you yourself do not dabble in, because a percentage of that sale is better than no sale at all. As you work up this value ladder, the more profit you should be able to make from each of these continuing services or exchanges. And the ultimate goal is to have a continuity or continuity, pardon me, like a subscription or passive way to get some earnings from customers, similar to a CSA operation. And once you've really been able to establish a chain, you're working with people and you've created a strong network, you can even start to leverage that a bit. You know, you're working with some chefs. Can you have a discussion with them and do a farm to table event? Are you wanting to do a pop-up shop day at your farm and bring in local food trucks? All of these opportunities have just passively opened themselves up because you've been looking to source to take care of other means of income.
Can you hear me now, Sage?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, and this is something I said we got out of markets, but actually, for my own farm, we started at an incubator farm, where you rent your space, you rent your land, you rent the tractors, but you're there for a finite amount of time. So we are in the process of transitioning away from that incubator and to a partnership with the community college where we are a for-profit beginning farmer just renting land from a community college. And part of our lease in the agreement with the college was that we had to restart the on-site farmers markets. So it's actually happening as we speak. I have one of my farm employees there working it. But what we've been able to do at that market is actually it wasn't able to support multiple vendors. We weren't able to bring in like a normal weekend farmers market. So what we've been able to do is just work with our friends and with our partners and the people that we know kind of in our group. We have a woman who does certified organic teas and tinctures and medicinal herbs. We have a flower farmer. We have the culinary school does baking and pastry. We have a woman who grows, she does potted plants. We have, I'm the vegetable farmer, and we kind of just aggregate ourselves and just get them wholesale from our friends. And we have a coffee company. We have, yeah, there's a whole mix of things. But we kind of serve as the aggregator and then just have this own little pop-up market where we are able to support each other's businesses, but they don't have to come out and stand at a market for 4 hours. So it's kind of been a nice little win for everybody, and we've been able to add a lot of diversity to a market that wouldn't have been able to have it without a situation like that. So that we've turned that pop-up event, which we started last year as like a pop-up market, and that has become a weekly Wednesday market now at our new location. And we're also partnering with the culinary school to do farm to table dinners, which we've done in the past. And again, yeah, definitely great networking because everybody who comes out to those wants to be on a farm at sunset. So everyone's pretty happy at those.
And so as that has happened, like, was that something that uh, businesses came to you and were looking for you to sell their products, or you reached out to them and began consolidating?
It was both. It was
Oh,
both. So some of them were people that I knew, especially the tea company. I just really love her farm and her as a farmer. So I reached out to her and immediately asked. But then there were other people. Our flower farmer actually messaged me on Instagram and said, "Hey, can I come? I live down the street. Can I bring my flowers?" Absolutely. So now we have the community involvement. We have everyone that she knows is now coming to the market. Again, it's just building a larger community than we would have been able to do by ourselves, by just participating with the people who are doing the things around us. So it's been a nice win for everyone so far, and it's vastly improved the market. This is a market that didn't exist on a college campus during the summertime. So this is the very first year, and it's been pleasantly surprising, and I attribute a lot of that to kind of the diversity in the group that we've been able to kind of pull together for that kind of on our own on the back end.
wow, that's honestly like really crazy that essentially like it got to a point where it built its own momentum is what I'm trying to say. It felt like, and how quickly were you able to notice that transition? Just for like even my own knowledge here, like how quickly was that turnover once you started bringing in additional products?
This, this is the 5th week of the market. So yeah, it was kind of instantly. Like week 1, we didn't really have that much. And by week 3, we probably had 6 other people or 6 other businesses represented other than myself. And it's been crazy ever since. So yeah, it was almost instantly. And now again, even just the idea behind that, you tag another farm who posts it, who reposts it or shares it on their like all of a sudden you have like there's ripple effects with social media, with advertising, with tagging people, with kind of getting the word out, especially if you are starting up, if you're not going into an established market. This is very much a market from scratch. We had to get an extension cord run out there so we could plug in a coffee maker. Like this was from nothing this year. So if you're starting from scratch, which a lot of people are, they're not starting with a ton of that. You're probably not getting into the best market in your biggest city right away. So being able to kind of work within somewhere that doesn't have quite the infrastructure and starting from that to what we were able to do this past few weeks has been incredible.
Absolutely. That's a crazy success story, and I'm really excited to see how it develops further as we move on. But like ultimately that comes down to diversifying your sales channels or your cash streams, because though we are farming, this all comes down to the finances. And this is a quote from the man himself, Adam Smith, the individual known as the father of capitalism. And I felt like this is a very important quote. It's not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from the regard of their own interest. This system was not set up for the mindset that a lot of people getting into this field have, which is you feel like what you're doing is a service. You are providing for people. Like there is a mindset that many small diversified vegetable farmers have where they're just happy to be able to support a community. Again, if we were different, if we were selling shoes, that would not be the case, and we would be a bad sneaker salesman. So let's treat ourselves the same. The only thing, if I could wag my finger at Mr. Smith, he forgot the farmer in this quote, but hey, I can't knock him too much. And we start to look at this because this is the most important part, regardless if you have a business plan or a business canvas, you need to have your financials on there. This is pretty basic stuff: profit and loss, the money in, the money out at the end of every month, the balance sheet, which at the end of the year may throw some people for a little bit of a curveball, but that's because if you have if you're like Sage, I made 30,000 years and I only have $3,000 left, check your balance sheet. Where did you invest in your farm and gain that equity? The hardest thing for me is cash flow projections. It's really a tricky part for most people to digest, I feel like, because unless you have someone that says, I'm going to buy X amount of peppers X times a week for X period of time, you're not really going to know how much you're going to profit from these pepper plants. But you can do some research. You can go to those local farmers markets. You can go to the grocery stores. You can compare what you have to what is being sold and then price it appropriately. That's one of the best ways you can do it. And then as you kind of develop into a bit of a larger entity, or you're wishing to go for some of those larger loans, an enterprise budget, which is something that I myself don't have a lot of experience with, but you're creating a list of your gross income and your expenses to help you essentially calculate the price per unit of the crops that you are growing. When you're thinking, like, as you're thinking all of the finances through, be sure to think about like debt servicing. Your principal can be written off if your equipment is depreciating at the same rate as it, which it most likely is, but that would be something a CPA would be able to speak with you a bit much more. I'm by no means a tax expert, but being aware of debt serving or your various streams of income. Kagan, myself, and many other farmers have multiple forms of income. So like that is also something to keep in mind. And ultimately, the easiest part of owning a farm, in my opinion, is growing. Like a lot of like we know how to grow and we can figure out how to grow real well. It's managing the back end to be able to continue to grow is what can make things tricky for a lot of people.
And this too, again, as we spoke to kind of the depth of the business plan that you needed initially, these are things that you should have in it. Again, how deep you want to go with each of these, where any business plan should probably be included your profit and loss statement, a balance sheet. You should have cash flow projections. You should have a general budget, and then a debt schedule. I think was one of the biggest revelations for myself was look at how much money you project to spend and how much money you project to bring in month by month and see how they balance each other out or see where the gaps are. because you may have a profitable business on paper. A lot of farms, the issue isn't necessarily gross or net, it's more cash flow. So there's going to be times throughout the season where you might have a profitable business that can't cash flow itself. And you should know that ahead of time. You should know that if you're starting a small vegetable operation, probably 70% of your expenses, probably 90% of your expenses that aren't labor are going to be before the season. So knowing what that looks like and what you need to go from maybe your first season, it's easy to get started when you have the startup capital. But by that second season, if your money doesn't come in until March and you need it in February, you need a way to remedy that. So I think the debt schedule is one of the biggest things that all farmers should do. But again, whether you're working with a financial consultant to build out a business plan that includes very in-depth models of what these look like, or just writing a generalized one for yourself, they should include some aspect of all of these.
And then we begin to like look at that and how we can fund our operation. I want to start with research because that is something that I feel like being Rodale, being a nonprofit entity, a lot of people do come to us and ask like, hey, I want to go out, I want to farm, what grants are there? If that was the case, we would have a lot more farmers. and I say that with all the love in my heart. There are plenty of great grants to take advantage of that we're going to be talking about, but there is, to the greater umbrella of grants that will over your farming career you will be applicable for, there is a substantial amount of administrative labor, and depending on the size of the grant itself, there's going to be credentials that you're going to need to be able to provide, as well as fit in a very specific scope. Just like any job position, there's essentially a scope of work for a grant that is going to need to be funded. If you're wanting to do something new or you're going to try to do something better than anyone else, I guess research grants are kind of an avenue for you to try to pursue, but they should never be looked at as an opportunity for you to just go and start farming. Outside of a few exceptions here and there, because they are a bit easier, but even then they are still a grant, they are not guaranteed. Outside of that, you have your more commonish things. You have your mortgages for your land. That's a real common mistake. I do not encourage anyone to go out and buy some land. Go mess someone else's up first. Go figure out what you want to do, how you want to do it, and even where you'd want to do it, while gaining the farming experience and knowledge that you're going to need to be successful. Of course, you have your infrastructure loans for your assets. Anything above $5,000 or more is considered infrastructure on a farm. You have your operations or your working line of credit for your immediate needs, and then your self-funding. Self-funding is something that I have started to understand the value of needing to self-fund for the first year or two, now that I'm in this myself, because I need to figure out if I'm going to like this or not. And if I really go in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking of I'm a consultant, how could I not like farming? And I go in there 2 years in and I realize that I just like talking about it and I don't actually like doing it, which is not the case, but I just like talking about it. And I get a loan, I'm on that hook. Like I am stuck, I am committed. Whereas like, yes, I may have to bootstrap some things if I'm self-funding. Yes, I may even have to be more limited in my reach, but that's okay because all we have said is try to take things slow and be confident in what you're doing. And if you're self-funding and you're kind of forcing yourself to be slow, it also kind of forces you to be efficient and be confident in the systems that you're making. Self-funding is really sketchy. I'm not going to tell you not to self-fund though. It's a slippery slope. The way I look at it is if you are an investor in your own business and you should respect a return on that investment is how I kind of look at it.
You should also, I will add, again, if you're setting up your business correctly, in your accounting, you should be recording what you're putting in and be accounting for that, where your business essentially owes you money, because that is the transaction that's happening. So making sure that you're recording it the right way and making sure that eventually when your business is profitable and you are able to pull some money, that you're pulling it from from an established an account, and there's a reason you're pulling from it other than it's profitable. You're actually owed money. So it's counted differently. So questions for your accountant, but again, making sure that you're setting it up the right way to make sure you can track that, to make sure you can get that money if you are self-funding, to make sure that you're getting that money back and you're getting it back appropriately.
Absolutely. And Kegan, I know you've taken advantage of a few of grants. There's like the PA Vitality grant, there's the cost share grant, there are the NRCS opportunities, such as like the 823 loans that are available as well. So there are absolutely areas for you to take advantage of. Reach out to your local NRCS office or your state ag agency are usually the two best. Also touch base with us. We'd be happy to share whatever information of what available grants we know that would be applicable for individuals in your area.
On the
But about
grant note, I'll say grants are for specific projects. Grants are, I want to start a farm. There's no grant for I want to start a farm. I need a grant for a well here. It's going to be this deep. I need, like, they are for very specific projects. So making sure that you have, again, that's why this is coming in this order, is making sure that you have a good plan, make sure that it is well researched, making sure that it's well written, making sure it's well described, and then taking it somewhere where they can actually make an educated decision based on what you've brought them. So making sure that you've done your steps up to this point is really going to help you get better grants, but it's also going to help you get more grants because you can be more specific, you can be more pinpointed. There's probably a million grants for everything, some of them more useful than others. If it's a 5-day application process for a $200 grant, I'm probably not filling it out, but there are some really big ones. So making sure that you're keeping an eye to how hard it is to apply, how competitive it is, and then how realistic it is that you're going to get it.
And it goes beyond the farm too. If you're looking for assistance with like business planning, that is also something that is available. And if
Yeah,
you
the
are a
Pennsylvania
Pennsylvania,
Vitality Grant, I don't know, actually not sure that anyone's ever been turned down for that. If you've applied, they've gotten it. And that is for up to $7,500 back for writing a professional business plan with kitchen table consultants. They are current and former farmers who are financial consultants who can kind of help you build out your QuickBooks, make sure your credit card reporting is talking to everything, making sure that it all tracks with what you've described in a well-written business plan. And that business plan has gotten me grants just because it's professionally done. It's professional. I could take that to a bank and get a small business loan based on what we wrote and worked on together. So again, if you just need one for yourself, if you just need one for maybe a local partner or something, or if you need one for a bank, maybe that's time for the Pennsylvania Vitality Grant. But yeah, there's kind of all scales available. But between that and reaching out to your local NRCS agent for your infrastructure grants, I think are your best options, because those grants tend to change so often that the people who run them are the only ones who really know the ins and outs of them. So we get asked this question all the time about grants, and I can't tell you the specifics of very many grants because they change so often. So stay in contact with the people whose job it is to describe and get those grants for you, and those are those agencies. So just make sure that you're in there, you're registered with the FSA, you get your USDA number, especially if you're getting certified organic. So do that part ahead of time, and it'll make a lot of it so much easier going forward.
so we had our idea for the farm, we figured out what we wanted to do, we funded it, we're growing it, and we are expanding, and it is great, but we've reached a point where that balloon is big. And we have to figure out, do we want to let some air out, or do we need to tag out and have someone else make another balloon? I.e., do we need to bring in some other help? Because that is labor is a double-edged sword. As a farmer, especially as a small organic farmer, we are very community based. we sell through a community based mindset. So labor is not bad by strengthening your community, but it is going to be your biggest expense. So before we make that commitment, let's evaluate and make sure that if we are getting labor, it's because we absolutely have to. And if we absolutely have to, we know 100% the reason for why that labor is needed, so we can invest in the right talent to best handle the problems that we are trying to manage.
I
But
think it's something like 90% of in-season costs for small farmers is labor. If you're able to control labor, you're able to run the farm. It's a matter of balancing it. So yeah, I think this slide is super important because it is if you can manage labor, that's a huge part of managing your overall farm.
so let's think about it. What skills do you have? What are you good at? In a past life, I was a landscaper. So, like any type of architectural designs or anything outside like that, I'm comfortable with. I've done a bit of construction as well. So, if I need to build an equipment shed, that's not a problem. The moment, though, that I get into any amount of plumbing or electrical, I realize that I'll be able to grow plenty of transplants to be able to fund that venture better than if I were to ever be able to do it on my own. Even if you do have those skills, though, does it pay you to address them? Like, do you have the time? Do you have the resources? Because very well in season, like those are fairly limited. And so like we can look and see, okay, well, if we're having a stress, how often is this stress happening? Is it happening once a year? Can I power through it and create a plan to handle it next year? Or is this something that happens frequently enough that I need to look into outsourcing? I think outsourcing is a great opportunity um, in lieu of labor, especially for one and done type projects. Uh, but even outside of that, if it's something that you just need hands on the field, like reach out even to your clientele, look at what labor alternatives there are. Do you have a U-pick? Is there a work share where you're able to give $500 worth of CSA credit for X amount of hours worth of work? Are there just volunteers? You know, ultimately, are you just at capacity?
We call them the beer and pizza crew. So bulk harvest where you just need hands, you just need somebody to pick things up and put them down. You just need people to help carry things. We call them the beer and pizza crew on our farm, where sometimes if you can get through it with just some volunteers and you just need them twice a year, you can get away with it. But yeah, also making sure that uh, you have enough. It's funny to say, but in the beginning, if you bring on someone who is very qualified, who's ready to go, who's maybe you're running a 1 acre market garden and they have 1 acre market garden experience, you might find yourself and your farming skills redundant. So making sure that you fit together with the person that you're looking to hire, because you may, if they are a really good worker and if they are really qualified and familiar with the systems, you may not be needed on the farm. So do you expand your farm? Do you like dive full scale into the business end of it? Do you expand your marketing? Like, what do you do with your time if the labor goes really well? Also having a plan for what happens if the labor goes poorly. But also, I think sometimes, especially as a small farm, if you have someone who can do 75% of what you can do, and you're still planning on being there 50% of the time, there's an extra 25% there. So what does that extra 25% go towards? And it should be on those larger, we call them $10 jobs, not $2 jobs. So if I have someone who can harvest carrots, I don't have someone who can run the business like I can. So I hire people to do the $2 jobs so I can do the higher level things. So making sure that you've thought about that and kind of where your time is going to be devoted towards. In the beginning, it's probably just going to be to scaling up. I'm gonna use 25% of my time to seed more, to prep more, to do more tarping. But you may come to a time where that 25% is better served doing other things to benefit the business that you can't hire someone to do.
Absolutely. And to that point, like I always look at it as like if you are looking at hiring a person on your farm, can you visualize the 75 to $100,000 of value that they're going to be able to provide for you? If you can't, well then let's look at outsourcing. If you can, you're like, I definitely can provide enough work, then sure. But like ultimately, like this just comes down to farming is a flexible amorphous being, and well, at least that's what I think a lot of people come in with the idea of, but really there is a structure to this. There is a method to the madness, and being able to take your time, figure out your system, and figure out where you want to fit. I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, or as hallmark, I guess, as it sounds like, figure out where in this crazy organic world you want to fit. Like that's the biggest advantage you can give yourself. So you're able to be confident with what you're doing, and you're able to know or be efficient in everything that you're doing moving forward to that, pardon me, to that point of overlap. Like for me, I know like I'm not a marketing guy, I'm not a social media guy. First person I would hire is going to be a marketing specialist so they can handle my Instagram. But I'm happy that I have that. That's a big strength for me to have, because I know now that if I'm going to be, when I'm looking through candidates, I'm not going to be interested in half of them, because half of them may not even want to be online themselves. Also, one thing with this, as like we start to recap, I wanted to think about like access to your farm. Like, what are your markets, but not just access to your markets, access for vehicles, parking lot. Do you have space for a shop? Can you efficiently get to all of the delivery spots in your area, or are you more rural? Like, keep in mind your own natural limitations. Don't try to overcome them. But I think that's all we got for you, folks. We really appreciate you attending. We hope you're able to find some value in this. And if anyone has some questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box now. We'd be happy to help.
There's one I saw come through about the labor cooperatives. Um, yeah, sometimes unless you have trained volunteers, it is really hard because you end up spending a lot of your time supervising first-time farmers instead of actually getting a lot of things done. So if you're not doing something, if you're not working with the same person regularly, or you're not doing something very simple, it can be hard with people who aren't regular volunteers. So it just depends on the situation, I guess.
If you're looking at like H2A workers, it does come down to like finding the people that fit your operation and then keeping them, because the H2A industry itself is very competitive from the labor side. So you will be able to find the right candidates for your operation. It's just going through the administrative burden that's going to be put on you, because it's a pretty hefty responsibility. Um, yeah.
What is a good way of figuring out if you have market for produce you're looking to sell, especially if no one in your area is selling it? Figs, hassocks, kiwi berries. Um,
Start
I would
selling.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was going to say, start selling stuff that you know they will like, so it gives you an opportunity to educate them on why they want this. And that's really the best way I've seen people find success.
And that could be a good long-term thing. If you have stuff that's ready to go now, I would reach out to, again, find someone in your area who maybe, I mean, figs is pretty open to any restaurant. I think any restaurant would be open to fresh figs. But for kiwi berries and some of the more specialty things, I would use the figs as like my intro. I would go in and just show up with a fig or two and make sure they know my name, and then talk to them and see. Some restaurants are going to be more likely to use those, some aren't. Some are going to be excited just because they've never heard of a kiwi berry, so they're going to come up with a kiwi berry jam to put on their menu. So just things like that. So I would probably say a restaurant or a chef would probably be your best option for that. And then again, forming a partnership with them because they are perennials, because it does take a little longer to get online, have a little insurance, and knowing that you can kind of develop your market with what you have now and have it grow as you're able to expand your perennial operation too. So that would be my option for that. And as you get to scale, take it to market and get that retail price, get a little bit more higher price for that, for each of those specialty items.
Okay. And then there was another question to follow that. I want to move into farming from a completely unrelated field, but it seems there's a lot of knowledge to get my head around. Do you have any book recommendations or starting points for people like me? I'm sure there are. things like expenses that I wouldn't know to look out for, so on and so forth. Absolutely, there are. There's a million different resources, and I think ultimately what it comes down to is where are you, what is stopping you from immediately pursuing your farming journey? Like, are you struggling from the operational perspective? Do you not know, like, what is good land? Do you not know what infrastructure you need? Do you not know how to make a crop rotation? Or is this something where you're like, well, I'm kind of comfortable with all that. I'm gardening right now. It's more so all of these like administrative and financial responsibilities. Feel free, please reach out to Kegan or myself, and we'd be able to like give you some more pointed resources. But in terms of like generalized resources, the No-Till Gardening Handbook from Jesse Frost. I know you're a big JM fan yourself, Kegan.
Mark Gardner, that was one, my economics brain that spoke to me for that. If you want to see like numbers and spreadsheets, and if you need to see the profitability per bed foot, that was really kind of what connected with me as someone who came into farming. I'm very much a beginning farmer. I think we're in our sixth year of veggie farming. So a lot of this was all new to me. But again, even when we sit down with somebody, I usually like to find out kind of what is your experience now. Maybe you are a gardener, maybe you grow houseplants, maybe are you experienced with working with living things? How much time do you have to dedicate to your business? And then what is your access to resources? Whether that, can you apply for a grant? Do you have a rich uncle who wants to start a farm? Or are we kind of bootstrapping this from nothing? That's okay. Or you may also have, maybe you have local connections. It's resources. It's not just money. Um, we can rent tractors, we can rent infrastructure, we can find somebody who does something, but really it's a lot of those other local connections that you're going to have have on your own. So those are usually the three things that we try to assess in our initial meeting with any consulting client is kind of your experience now, so we can direct you. Maybe you need to read a book, maybe you need to go to a farmer training program like Rodale has with the Rift program, or maybe you need to go and work on a veggie farm for a year. Maybe you're ready to go. But kind of using that to decide and try to gauge where you are. But those are usually the three questions we try to answer when we sit down with anybody. So it's different for everybody, but I would start with those. YouTube University is a very real thing. And then for myself, I actually, a lot of YouTube, a lot of reading, and then actually got out and worked a year on a veggie farm, went through went through the Rodale farmer training program, and then started my own farm from there. So kind of did all of the options, but whatever is available to you, whatever is an option for you, you can definitely learn. We can kind of help you decide, point you in the right direction. We can get you to the rabbit hole. You're just going to have to go down it yourself. So yeah, we can get you to the resources. They're just going to be a little different for everybody. It is a paid internship with housing. It's a pretty rare opportunity where you actually get paid a living wage and housing is included to work through the farmer training program. They have a long season and a short season program. There is a Rodale campus in California down near Oxnard. The Rodale training program is not out there quite yet, but California has a lot of farmer training, a lot of small farm help, a lot of small farm assistance, and Rodale has a consultant located just in the Central Valley in California. So we have someone you can work with. We can connect you with farmer training programs out there. And you should definitely go out and check out the Rodale Resource Center down in Southern California either way. But yeah, so there's a Rodale presence in California, and ALBA, ALBA is a farmer training program out in California that's probably the most successful in the country. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out in California. Oh, labor cooperative and a labor growers group investment. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Anthony. I'm not familiar. I'll most likely be reaching out to you. Well, perfect, everyone. If there's no other questions or anything, we appreciate your time. Please feel free to reach out to Kegan or myself, whether it be call or email. We're more than available, or just feel free to reach out to Rodale. You can get in touch with us or some of our other colleagues that are consultants as well. If we can't help you, chances are they can. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day. Take care.